She knelt in the sand beside a 7-year-old boy she'd never met, rebuilding the castle he'd just watched collapse. His father stood 10 feet away, jaw clenched, watching a stranger in a $1,000 coat ruin her stockings for a child he'd spent 3 years shielding from exactly this kind of woman. He didn't know yet that she would leave. He didn't know yet that she would come back. He only knew, in that single suspended moment, that something in his carefully ordered life had just cracked wide open, and there would be no sealing it shut again. If you're enjoying this story, please drop a like and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has traveled. And stay with me until the very end, because the most beautiful moments are always saved for last. The tide had gone out early that Saturday, leaving Harbor Point's long crescent of beach stretched thin and gray under a sky that couldn't decide whether to clear or storm. Landon Hayes noticed the clouds the way he noticed everything now, with one eye always half on his son. Noah was crouched near the waterline with a red plastic bucket, packing wet sand with the serious concentration of a boy who believed, against all evidence, that this time the castle would hold. "Buddy, watch the tide line," Landon called without lifting his coffee from his mouth. "I know, Dad. The part you think is far enough? It's not." "Dad!" Landon smiled, a small private smile he only ever showed when Noah wasn't looking. The kid had his mother's voice when he got exasperated. Same flat little sigh at the end of the word, like the adult in the room was being unreasonable. 3 years, and Landon still caught himself listening for her in the spaces his son left behind. He took another sip of his coffee. It had gone lukewarm 15 minutes ago, which meant they'd been out here longer than the hour he'd promised. He didn't mind. Saturdays were for whatever Noah wanted, within reason, and what Noah wanted this week was the beach, the bucket, the same doomed sandcastle he'd been trying to build since April. Landon was 32 years old. He looked closer to 37, depending on how he'd slept. People in Harbor Point called him a nice young man with nice manners and a nice kid, and the nice part of that wasn't a compliment, exactly. It was the town's way of saying they felt sorry for him without having to say so out loud. He ran a small boatyard on the north end of the harbor, inherited from his father, kept afloat through a combination of stubbornness and a local reputation for honest work. He fixed what people brought him. He didn't ask for more than that. What he'd wanted once was gone, and what he had now was standing barefoot at the edge of the ocean, holding a plastic shovel. "Dad, it's falling!" "Told you." "No, but the back part. The wall." Landon set his cup down on the weathered piece of driftwood he used as a beach table and walked over. Noah's castle was, as predicted, losing its south wall to the soft undermining of the outgoing tide. Landon squatted in the sand, jeans already damp at the knees, and started patching. "See how the water sneaks under?" he said. "It doesn't hit the wall. It goes underneath it first. You want to pack the base harder than the top." "But I packed it hard." "Harder than that." Noah pressed his small palm against the sand with an earnest, furrowed concentration that made Landon's chest tighten for reasons he couldn't name. Sometimes fatherhood wasn't the hard stuff. Sometimes it was this: a small hand pressing sand, a quiet beach, the uncomplicated trust of a child who still believed his father knew how to fix everything. That was when he heard the footsteps. Most people in Harbor Point walked the beach in sneakers or barefoot. This was neither. These were boots. Low-heeled, leather, expensive, crunching across the wet sand at a speed that suggested their owner hadn't noticed the water yet. Landon glanced up. She was maybe 10 yards away, walking fast with her head down, a long camel coat pulled tight against the wind and a phone pressed hard to her ear. Her hair was dark, pulled back into something that had started as neat and lost the argument with the ocean air. She wasn't from here. That much was immediately clear. Her boots, her posture, the tight, furious set of her shoulders. Everything about her said she'd mistaken this beach for a walking path in a city where people did not stop to watch the water. "I don't care what he said," she was saying into the phone. "I'm not doing it. No, listen to me. Marcus, listen. I told you 3 weeks ago I was done, and you—" She stopped. Not because of the call, because a wave had come in higher than the ones before it, and her left boot was suddenly submerged to the ankle. The words that came out of her mouth next were not the kind of words Landon liked Noah hearing. Noah, for his part, had frozen mid-pat. He stared at her with his mouth slightly open, the way he stared at loud things he was trying to decide whether to be scared of. The woman looked down at her ruined boot, then at the phone, then, finally, at the two of them. Her face, Landon noticed, was the kind of face you didn't see often in Harbor Point. Sharp at the cheekbones, expensive somewhere around the mouth. Not beautiful in any obvious way, but put together with the precision of someone who'd been photographed enough to know her own angles. She was maybe 28, maybe less. Her eyes were very tired. "Sorry," she said, to Noah specifically. "Sorry, buddy. That was a bad word. Your dad's going to be mad at me." "He already is," Noah said solemnly. She laughed. It came out of her before she could stop it. A short, surprised laugh that seemed to catch her off guard as much as it caught Landon. "Marcus," she said into the phone, "I have to go." "No, I said I have to go. I'll call you back." "No, I'll call you back." She hung up and stood there in her wrecked boot, the wind pulling pieces of her hair loose, looking for one long moment like someone who had forgotten what she was supposed to do next. Then her eyes dropped to the castle. "Oh," she said. "Oh, no." Landon followed her gaze. The wave that had got her boot had also, apparently, taken the south wall with it. Half of Noah's castle was gone, sloughed flat into the sand like a melting cake. Noah's lower lip did the thing it did. Landon knew that thing. 3 years, he'd been learning that thing. Noah was not a crier, not really, not anymore. But there were certain griefs a 7-year-old couldn't hide, and losing the same castle for the 3rd Saturday in a row apparently qualified. "Hey," Landon said quickly. "Hey, we can fix it. Bud, look at me. We can fix it, okay? That's why we have the bucket." "It's always the same," Noah said, and his voice wobbled. "It always falls. Because that's what sand does. But it's not fair." Landon opened his mouth, and then he closed it, because he didn't have an answer for that one. It had not been on his list of questions to prepare for. "It's not fair" was a question with no good father answer when your son was 7 and your wife had been dead for 3 years, and every castle you'd tried to build since had, in one way or another, come apart under a wave you didn't see coming. He was still looking for something to say when the woman knelt. She didn't crouch. She knelt, straight down onto the wet sand, in a coat that had probably cost more than Landon's mortgage payment, and put her hands in the ruin of the castle. "Okay," she said briskly to Noah. "Okay, kid. Let's talk strategy." Noah stared at her. "What's your name?" she said. "Noah." "Noah. I'm Sienna. I don't know anything about sandcastles because I grew up in Chicago, which is a place with no beach." "Lake Michigan," Noah said automatically. She blinked. "Excuse me?" "There's a lake. It's a beach. My dad told me." Landon, despite himself, smiled. "Okay, fair," said Sienna. "There's a lake. But I never built a castle on it, so you're going to have to teach me. What's the first rule?" Noah considered her with the long, skeptical evaluation of a child who had been told exactly once too often that some adult was going to be fun. Then, apparently deciding she could be trusted on a provisional basis, he said, "You pack the bottom harder than the top." "Got it. Bottom harder than the top. What else? And you can't put it too close to the water." "Which we clearly did," Dad said. "Your dad was right," Sienna said, and for the first time she looked up at Landon. "Up close?" "Well, up close she was younger than he'd thought. 26, maybe." The tiredness around her eyes wasn't age. It was something else, something Landon had seen in his own mirror often enough to recognize. She had the look of a person who had been asked to be a certain kind of thing for a long time and had just realized she didn't want to be it anymore. "Hi," she said to him. "I'm ruining your morning." "You're ruining your coat." She looked down at herself. The sand was already soaking through both knees of whatever expensive fabric she was wearing. "Huh," she said. "Yeah. You don't have to, I know." She held his eyes for a second too long. Then she turned back to Noah and said, "All right, engineer, where's the bucket?" For the next 40 minutes, Landon Hayes stood on a beach in Harbor Point and watched a woman he had never met before get down into the sand with his son and rebuild the castle. She didn't do it well. She used too much water. She packed the tower too high and it slumped, and Noah laughed at her, and she laughed back and called him a traitor. She asked him what each part was for. "This is where the king lives. This is where the horses are. This is a trap. Don't step here." And she listened to his answers the way Landon had almost forgotten adults could listen to children. Like what the kid said was actually interesting, like she wasn't already thinking about the next thing. Landon stood there with his arms crossed and his coffee gone cold and tried, and mostly failed, to understand why his throat was tight. He didn't like her. That was what he told himself standing there. He didn't like her. She was a city woman in a ruined coat. She was someone's crisis on someone else's phone. She was the kind of person who breezed into small towns for a weekend and left tips big enough to embarrass the waitress. She was temporary. Everything about her screamed temporary. Her shoes, her phone, the way she'd hung up on a man who had clearly not expected to be hung up on. He didn't like her, and he especially didn't like the way Noah was looking at her. Noah was looking at her the way Noah used to look at his mother. "Bud," Landon said finally, "we gotta go. You've got soccer. 5 more minutes." Noah: "5 more minutes, Dad. Please, 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 please." 3, Sienna cut in smoothly, without looking up from the moat she was digging with a piece of driftwood. 3 more minutes, and then you listen to your dad. That's the deal. Noah accepted this immediately. Deal. Landon watched her, not sure whether to be grateful or annoyed. He settled, with some effort, on grateful. "Thank you," he said. She looked up. "For what?" "For," he gestured vaguely, "for not letting him cry about it." "Oh." Something flickered across her face. "Yeah, well, I'm not great with kids crying. It's not noble. I just don't know what to do with it." "That's pretty much the job description." "What is?" "Parenting, not knowing what to do with it and doing it anyway." She laughed, shorter this time. "Then I'd be a terrible parent." "You'd be fine." He didn't know why he said it. It came out before he could catch it. She looked at him strangely, the way a person looks at a stranger who has accidentally said something private. 3 minutes is up," Landon said, and turned away before she could answer. Basm. Her name, he learned, was Sienna Vale. He learned it because he looked her up that night after Noah was asleep, sitting at the kitchen table with a beer he wasn't drinking and a laptop he had no business opening. He wasn't proud of it. He told himself it was about Noah. A strange woman had spent 40 minutes with his son, and Harbor Point was a small town, and he needed to know who he was letting into their Saturdays, even by accident. That was the story he gave himself. The truth was more complicated, and he wasn't interested in looking at it yet. Sienna Vale, 27, based in Chicago. Executive at a lifestyle media company he'd vaguely heard of. The kind of place that ran glossy articles about women in their 20s who were changing the world, written mostly by other women in their 20s who were changing the world. There were photographs. A lot of photographs. In most of them she was smiling a smile Landon didn't recognize from the beach. A professional smile. All teeth and no eyes. She had been on some 30 under 30 list 2 years running. She had dated, briefly and publicly, a man whose name Landon didn't recognize but whose jawline suggested he sold something expensive. 3 weeks ago, she had stepped down from her position. No explanation. One short, careful statement. Taking time to focus on personal priorities. Landon closed the laptop. He sat for a long time with the kitchen quiet around him. The house made the small settling noises old houses made. The fridge humming, a board creaking upstairs where Noah had rolled over. In the next room, Noah's nightlight cast a thin slice of yellow under the door. Landon had painted that room himself 2 summers ago, sky blue, because Noah wanted it the color of the top part of the sky, not the bottom part. "The bottom part's the ocean, Dad. The sky is the top part." Landon put his forehead on his arms on the kitchen table and let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding since 11 o'clock that morning. He was not going to think about her. He was not going to think about the look on her face when she'd said, "I'd be a terrible parent," the way the words had landed with more weight than either of them expected. He was not going to think about Noah's face when she was laughing with him in the sand. He was going to go to bed. He did not go to bed. He sat there until almost 1 in the morning, not looking up anything else about Sienna Vale, not drinking the beer, just listening to his house breathe. She was in town for the summer. That much became clear by the following Tuesday, when Landon saw her come out of the little grocery on Main Street with 2 paper bags and a pair of sunglasses that were too big for her face. He was across the street, locking up the boatyard office. He saw her before she saw him. For a second, he thought about not saying hello. He could have just ducked back inside, and she would have walked to wherever she was going, and that would have been that. A nice round story. A woman passing through. Instead, he said, "Hey." She turned. The sunglasses came off. "Oh," she said. "Hi, hi." She shifted the bags. "Boat guy." "Boat guy? You're... This is your place, right? I walked past yesterday." "Landon." "Landon. Right. Sienna." She lifted one of the bags slightly, like evidence. I'm renting the yellow house up on Beacon. For a while. I think. For a while. Indefinite while. He nodded. He didn't know what to do with his hands. He shoved them into his pockets. "Well, welcome." She laughed again, that same surprised laugh he'd heard on the beach. "That was very small town of you." "We try. Is it always this quiet?" "Usually quieter." "God." She closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them, they were almost soft. "That sounds incredible." He didn't know what to say to that either, so he said, "How's the castle?" Oh, the kid. The kid. He's good?" "He's good. He talks about you." That wasn't smart, and Landon knew it wasn't smart the moment he said it. Sienna's face did something complicated. Pleasure, and then something under the pleasure that looked almost like panic. "He does? My son is not subtle," said Landon. "What does he say?" "He says the lady at the beach was funny and bad at sandcastles, accurate on both counts, and he asked if you were coming back." There was a long pause. A car went by. Somewhere down the block, a screen door slammed. Landon could smell the bay, and the faint cutgrass smell that came off the park behind the church. The ordinary town around them went on being ordinary, and Sienna Vale stood across from him on the sidewalk with her 2 paper bags and looked at him like the question he had just asked had not been a question at all, but some kind of small, precise dare. "If I said yes," she said, "would you be okay with that?" He opened his mouth. The honest answer was no. The honest answer was, "My son already lost one woman, and you are not the kind of woman who stays." The honest answer was that he had been a father for 7 years and a widower for 3, and he had made himself a set of very clean rules about who he was allowed to let near his kid, and she broke all of them at once. "Saturday," he said. "We go to the beach Saturdays, around 9. She smiled. It wasn't the professional smile from the magazine photos. It was small and startled, and, he noticed, a little bit frightened. "I'll be there," she said. She was there. Not just that Saturday. The one after that, too. And the one after that. By the 3rd week, it wasn't the beach anymore. It was Saturday at the beach, and then a detour to the little coffee cart on the boardwalk because Noah had decided he was in love with their cinnamon rolls, and then a slow walk back past the harbor while Sienna peppered Landon with questions about boats he had never thought anyone outside the yard could find interesting. "What's that one?" "Lobster boat. That's a whole different shape. They need to sit flat in heavy water. See the stern?" "Landon, stop. I don't know what a stern is." "The back. Why didn't you just say the back?" "Because I was showing off." Noah walking between them with a cinnamon roll in each hand. Sienna had bought him a second one, something Landon had specifically ordered her not to do and would be pretending not to notice. Laughed out loud. "Dad never shows off," Noah announced. "Your dad shows off all the time," Sienna said. "He's just subtle about it." "What's subtle?" "It's when somebody's doing a thing but they don't want you to know they're doing it. Like when Dad pretends he didn't cry at Finding Nemo?" "Exactly like that." "Hey," said Landon. "You cried at Finding Nemo, man," Sienna said. "You have to own it." "I did not cry at Finding Nemo." "Noah?" "He cried so much, Dad." Landon laughed. He couldn't help it. It came up out of him like something stretching after a long sleep, and when he looked over, Sienna was already looking at him, and she wasn't smiling exactly. She was just watching him laugh, like she was studying it. He caught himself and looked away. Botigt. He called his sister that night. Marin was 35, a labor and delivery nurse in Portland, and the only person on earth Landon trusted with the whole truth about anything. She picked up on the 3rd ring, already suspicious. "You never call on a Saturday. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." Landon, I met someone. There was a very, very long silence on the other end of the line. Say that again? Marin said. I didn't meet someone. Stop. I met a person. She's here for the summer. She's been hanging out with Noah and me on the beach. Okay. That's it. That's the whole call. That is absolutely not the whole call. He sat down on the porch steps. The night was cool and the wind had picked up off the water, and he could hear, very faintly, a bell buoy clanging somewhere past the point. She's from Chicago, he said. Okay. She does some kind of media thing. She was on a magazine list. She stepped down from her job 3 weeks before she came here, and she hasn't told anyone why. How do you know she hasn't told anyone why? Because I looked her up. Oh, Landon. I know. Oh, Landon. I know, Marin. His sister was quiet for a moment. He could picture her face exactly. She'd be in her kitchen, leaning against the counter with one hand in her hair, doing what she always did when she was trying not to say the first thing that came to her mouth. Is Noah attached to her? She said, finally. Yeah. How attached? He asks about her on the days she's not around. Landon. I know. You know I have to say it. Then say it. Do not let that boy fall in love with a woman who's leaving. He closed his eyes. Out past the lawn, he could see the thin ribbon of moonlight on the water. In the window behind him, the soft glow of the hallway light, where Noah was asleep upstairs with one hand curled under his cheek and the other, Landon had checked earlier, holding a piece of driftwood Sienna had given him last week. She'd picked it up off the beach and drawn a little face on it with a felt-tip pen, and Noah had named it Bartholomew and was now sleeping with it. Too late, Landon said. Oh, honey, I know. Is she leaving? He thought about it. He thought about the way Sienna had said indefinite while. He thought about the phone calls he sometimes heard her end mid-sentence when Noah came running back. The way 3 days ago he'd caught her on the porch of the yellow house up on Beacon with her phone face down on the railing and her hands pressed flat against her eyes. I don't know, he said. That's worse than yes. Yeah. Landon, Marin said, listen to me. I am so glad you're alive again. Do you hear me? I am so glad. I have wanted this for you for 3 years, but please, be careful with that boy. I'm always careful with that boy. I know you are, which is how I know you're scared. He didn't answer. Call me next week, she said. Yeah, I love you. Yeah. He hung up and sat on the porch with the phone loose in his hand and watched the moon move, slowly, across the surface of the water. The first time Sienna came into the house, it was an accident. A storm came up fast on a Wednesday afternoon, the kind of August squall that flattened Harbor Point every few weeks. Sudden wind, sideways rain, the whole sky going the color of a bruise in 20 minutes. Noah had been at Landon's boatyard, pretending to help. Sienna had been walking back from the grocery 1 street over, and had gotten caught between buildings with no good way home. Landon saw her from the yard office, soaked through, standing under the awning of the hardware store across the way with one arm over her head, as if that was going to help. He waved her over. She ran. By the time she got to him, her hair was plastered to her face, and she was laughing. Real laughter, not the thin, polite laugh from the street. And Noah was already yelling her name from inside the office. Come on, Noah said, hanging off the door. Come in. You're all wet, Dad. She's all wet. We have to dry her. Buddy, give her a second. It's okay, Sienna said. She was still laughing, a little breathless. Hi, I am extremely soaked. I can see that. Your son is yelling at me. Accurate. I was not planning to invade your workplace. For the record, come inside. She hesitated for 1/2 second on the threshold. It was so small he almost missed it. But he didn't miss it. He was getting, by then, very bad at not noticing things about her. And for a second he wondered what that hesitation was. Whether it was him. Whether she too was keeping a set of rules about who she was allowed to let near what. Then she stepped inside. He gave her a flannel shirt out of the office closet, one of his old ones, thick, worn soft, and a hand towel for her hair, and she disappeared into the tiny back bathroom to change. When she came out, She was wearing his shirt over her own soaking pants and no shoes, and her hair was a dark, damp mess around her face, and Landon was looking at her so directly that Noah noticed. "Dad's staring at you," Noah observed. "Yes, he is," said Sienna. "Noah." "It's okay, Dad." Noah's tone was very magnanimous. "She's pretty." Sienna's face went red in a way that Landon had, until that moment, not believed was physically possible for her. He had seen her throw a lobster on a plate last week without flinching. He had seen her hang up on people he suspected were very powerful. He had not, until this moment, seen her blush. "You're both out of control," she said. "Storm's gonna last another hour," said Landon, saving her. "You want coffee? Please." So they sat in the boatyard office, all three of them, while the sky dumped water on Harbor Point and the old radio behind the desk crackled through a bad weather report. Noah built a fort out of 2 chairs and a tarp. Sienna drank Landon's terrible office coffee out of a mug that said "World's Okayest Boss," a gift from his one employee, and didn't complain once. The flannel shirt was enormous on her. The sleeves fell past her wrists. She kept pushing them up, and they kept falling back down. At some point, in the middle of the storm, Noah fell asleep under the tarp. Landon and Sienna sat at the desk, across from each other, the rain hammering the tin roof of the office, and for the first time since he'd met her, he didn't know what to say. She spoke first. "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah." Noah's mom. He felt it go through him, the old cold drop. But it wasn't what it used to be. 3 years, and the drop was lower now, softer. "Yeah," he said again. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to tell me." "Okay." She waited. He looked down at his coffee, then at Noah, asleep with his cheek pressed to the tarp, one small hand curled under his chin. "She was my wife," he said. She had an aneurysm. It was very fast. I was in the yard. Noah was 4. The school called me because she hadn't picked him up, and I thought she'd forgotten, and I was annoyed with her, and she was already gone. She'd been gone for 3 hours by the time I got home." He breathed in through his nose. "She never forgot anything. She wasn't that kind of mother. I should have known something was wrong." "Landon, it wasn't anyone's fault. I know that. The doctor said, you don't catch those things." "No. I don't like that the last thing I thought about her, before I knew, was that she'd been careless." Sienna didn't say anything for a long time. She didn't reach across the table. She didn't say she was sorry. She didn't do any of the things people usually did when he accidentally told them the story, which was why, for 3 years, he had mostly stopped telling people this story. She just sat there, across from him, and let the words exist. Then, finally, she said, "He's a good kid." "Yeah. You're doing a good job." "Most days?" "All the days." He looked up at her. Her eyes were very clear and very tired, and she was wearing his shirt, and the sleeves were falling over her wrists, and he thought, with a clarity that frightened him, "Oh no, oh no." The rain kept coming down. Noah murmured something in his sleep under the tarp, and shifted, and was quiet. "You don't have to tell me anything about you," Landon said, because he had to say something, because his heart was doing something he wasn't prepared to deal with. "You don't have to tell me why you're here. I know. But if you want to, I don't, yet." "Okay. Is that okay?" "Yeah." "Landon." "Yeah. Thank you for the shirt." "You're welcome." She smiled, small, and pulled the sleeves down over her hands again, and Landon watched her do it and understood, sitting there in his own office in the town he'd lived in his whole life, that he was in trouble. He was in the deepest trouble he had been in since he was 25 years old, and a dark-haired girl named Emma had walked into his father's boatyard with a broken outboard and a bad attitude and changed the shape of his entire life. He had not expected this. He had not asked for this. He had built himself very carefully a life that did not have room for this. Outside, the rain began slowly to ease. The sky over Harbor Point was still the color of a bruise, but you could see, far out over the water, the first thin pale line where the storm was ending, and something clearer was moving in behind it. Landon Hayes looked at the woman across his desk in his old flannel shirt, and at his son asleep under a tarp 6 feet away, and he thought, this is going to hurt. Whatever this is, however it ends, this is going to hurt. And then, Because he was a man who had learned 3 years ago that you didn't get to choose what hurt you, only what you did after. He poured her another cup of coffee. She held the mug with both hands and didn't look away from him. The rain kept easing. Noah slept on. And somewhere up the coast, still days away but already moving, a phone call Sienna Vale had been avoiding for a month was starting to ring. The phone call came in at 6:14 on a Thursday morning, and Sienna Vale let it go to voicemail. She was standing barefoot on the kitchen tile of the yellow house on Beacon, in a t-shirt she'd stolen from a boyfriend 2 relationships ago, waiting for the kettle. The phone buzzed across the counter, and she looked at it the way a person looks at a spider she's decided not to kill yet. Marcus Lenehan, her old boss, the man whose name, until 6 weeks ago, had been the most important name in her contacts list. She let it ring out. It rang again 40 seconds later. She let that one ring out too. Outside, the light was doing the thing it did in Harbor Point at 6 in the morning, the thing she'd almost stopped noticing because she saw it every day now. That slow, clean, pearl-colored light that rolled in off the water and made everything look like it had just been washed. In Chicago, she had not seen 6:14 in the morning unless she hadn't slept. Here, she kept waking up at 5:30 without an alarm, and she didn't know what that meant yet. The kettle whistled. She poured the water over the instant coffee she had given up being embarrassed about. She took the mug and the phone and went out onto the tiny back porch, and she sat on the top step in her bare feet and watched a gull argue with another gull over something invisible. And she thought about Landon Hayes. She had been trying for about 3 weeks now not to think about Landon Hayes. It wasn't working. The phone buzzed a third time. This time it was a text. Sienna, pick up. It's not what you think. Call me back by 10. She turned the phone face down on the step beside her. She didn't know yet what she was going to do. That was the problem. She had come to Harbor Point on what she'd told everyone was a 3-week decompression, a little salt air reset, a little break from the machine, back in the saddle by July. And somewhere along the way, the 3 weeks had turned into 5 and then 6, and now she had been here long enough to know the name of the woman who ran the grocery on Main Street, and the name of the dog that lived in the blue house on the corner, and the exact sound Noah Hayes made when he laughed so hard he gave himself the hiccups. She hadn't called her mother in 12 days. She hadn't opened her work email in 9. She had instead spent her Tuesdays and her Thursdays and most of her Saturdays sitting on a beach with a boy who had lost his mother and a man who was not looking at her the way men usually looked at her. And that more than anything else was what was scaring her. Men looked at Sienna Vale a certain way. She had known it since she was 19. She had, by 23, learned to use it. The hair, the smile, the angle of her chin in a lit room. Men looked at her and saw the thing they already wanted to see, and she had spent most of her 20s making sure the thing they saw was the thing she wanted to sell them. It was a useful skill. It had built her a career. It had also, somewhere along the line, made it very hard for her to tell what was her and what was the product. Landon Hayes did not look at her that way. Landon Hayes looked at her like she was a person he hadn't made up his mind about yet. It was the most unnerving thing that had happened to her in 10 years. She sipped the bad coffee and watched the gulls and thought, I have to leave. She thought, I am not going to leave. She thought, he asked about Noah's mother, like he was asking for permission. She thought, he didn't ask, you asked him. Somewhere inside the house, the phone she had left inside the house, the work phone, the one she had not turned on in 6 weeks, was probably full of messages she was going to have to read eventually. But the personal phone on the step beside her was enough for now. The personal phone was enough. The gull won its argument. Sienna finished her coffee and went inside to put on shoes. The boatyard was quiet in the mornings. She'd learned this. She'd learned it by walking past it 4 mornings in a row, pretending she was going somewhere else. Landon opened up at 7. His one employee, a lanky kid named Pete, who was 19 and didn't talk much, came in at 8. Between 7 and 8, Landon was alone with the radio and the work and the smell of the water, and Sienna had discovered, to her own enormous annoyance, that this was her favorite hour of the day. She didn't go in that morning. She walked past. She made herself walk past. She went all the way down to the point where the old lighthouse sat with its paint peeling and its windows boarded, and she stood on the rocks and watched a lobster boat move out of the harbor mouth, and she did not turn around and walk back to the yard. She turned around and walked back to the yard. Landon was outside when she came up, wiping his hands on a rag, sleeves pushed up to his elbows. He saw her from 20 feet away. He didn't smile, he didn't wave. He just looked at her. That open, unhurried look. The look that never decided about her one way or the other. The look she could not, for the life of her, figure out how to flirt with. "You look like you didn't sleep," he said. "Good morning to you too." "Morning. I slept fine." "You're lying." "Landon, I'm not judging. I'm just saying." He nodded toward the office. She followed him in. It was a small room with a bad ceiling fan and 2 folding chairs and the desk she had sat across from during the storm. And she had been in this room maybe 4 times in her life, but she already knew where the coffee pot was and where he kept the sugar and how the 3rd drawer of the filing cabinet stuck if you pulled it too fast. It was a measure of something, and she didn't want to think about what. He poured her a mug without asking. "You don't have to feed me every time I show up," she said. "Not feeding you, hydrating you. There's a difference." "You're ridiculous. I've been called worse." She sat down in the folding chair. He sat down on the edge of the desk. There was a moment, just a beat, when neither of them said anything, and Sienna felt it again. The thing she had been feeling for 3 weeks. That strange, dangerous, unfamiliar quiet that happened in a room when Landon Hayes was in it. She put the mug down. "My old boss called me this morning," she said. "Okay. Twice." "You answer?" "No." "Good." She looked up. "That's it? Good?" He shrugged. "You don't want to talk to him." "You didn't talk to him. Seems right. You don't even know what it's about." "Don't have to." "Landon." "Sienna." She laughed helplessly. She couldn't help it. She laughed and put her face in her hands for a second, and when she came back up, he was still looking at her with that same steady, unhurried attention, and she thought, "Oh, you are a problem. You are a specific and unsolvable problem." "They're offering me my job back," she said. "Ah. Plus, they're offering me more than my job back. Promotion, title change, the whole pitch." She swallowed. "I'd be the youngest editor-in-chief they've ever had. It's the thing. It's the thing I've been working toward since I was 22. Okay. Okay? Landon, okay? You want me to say something specific? I want you to say something." He set his coffee down. He looked at her for a long, long second. Outside, somewhere past the door, a seagull screamed, and a truck went by, and the ordinary business of Harbor Point went on without them. "It's not my call," he said finally. "I know that. I mean it, Sienna. It's not my call. You don't want me to be the reason you say yes or the reason you say no. You'd hate me either way." "I wouldn't." "You would. You don't know me well enough yet for me to be the reason." That one landed somewhere she wasn't ready for. "Oh," she said. "Yeah. Yeah. You came here because you wanted to figure out what you want. That was what you told me." "I did not tell you that." "You told Noah." "Noah?" 2 Saturdays ago, at the boardwalk. He asked you why you were in town, and you said you came here to figure out what you actually wanted. He's 7. He listens. She stared at him. He was still sitting on the edge of the desk. His jeans were dark with engine oil at one knee. His hair, which she had realized several weeks ago was slightly too long, fell forward when he looked down. He was not a polished man. He had not been sanded smooth by the life she had come from. He had a small scar at his left eyebrow, and his hands were working hands. And when he looked at her, it was without any of the calculations she had spent a decade learning to read in men's faces. "I hate this," she said quietly. "Yeah. I hate that you're being reasonable. I know. I came here to have a nervous breakdown in peace, Landon. I did not come here to be seen." "Well," he said, "sorry." She laughed again, but it came out wet this time. She turned her face toward the window so he wouldn't see it. He didn't push. He didn't come closer. He just stayed on the edge of his desk and gave her the minute she needed, and when she finally wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist and turned around, he was holding out a paper towel from the roll on the filing cabinet. "Classy," she said. "We don't carry tissues." "Of course you don't." She took the paper towel. She blew her nose. She felt absurd. She felt like a woman who had been paid exactly 4 months ago to give a keynote address to 600 people about owning your narrative. And here she was, crying into industrial paper in a boatyard office because a man with grease on his jeans had told her she didn't know him well enough yet. "Noah has soccer tonight," Landon said after a while. "I know." "You coming?" She looked up at him. He was being careful with his face, she could see. He was not asking for anything. "Do you want me to come?" she said. "Noah wants you to come." "That's not what I asked." He was quiet for a second. "Yeah," he said, "I want you to come." "Okay. Okay. I'm not saying yes to Chicago. Didn't ask. I'm not saying no either. Didn't ask that either. Landon. Sienna. Stop. Stop what? Stop being that. Being what? Being kind at me. It's not fair." He almost smiled. It was the closest she had seen him come to a real smile in a week, and it did not stay long on his face, and she wanted, with a sudden and embarrassing intensity, to put her hand against his jaw and hold it there. She didn't. She stood up instead, a little too fast, and handed him back the mug. 6 o'clock, she said. 6 o'clock. Okay. Sienna. Yeah. Whatever you decide, decide it for you. Not for him, not for me. Deal? She nodded. She didn't trust her voice. She left the office and she walked back to the yellow house on Beacon, and she did not call Marcus Lenehan back. And when she got to her kitchen, she stood at the counter with both hands flat on the tile, and she let herself breathe for the first time since 6:14 in the morning. The soccer field was at the elementary school, and by the time Landon pulled in with Noah in the back seat and the bag of orange slices on the passenger floor, it was their week for orange slices, a responsibility Noah took very, very seriously. Sienna was already there. She was standing by the chain-link fence in a hooded sweatshirt and jeans, which Landon had not seen her in before. She'd pulled her hair back in a way that made her look, for a second, like any other mother at the field. Not a Chicago person. Not a magazine person. Just a woman at a 7-year-old's soccer game. Noah spotted her before Landon did. "Sienna! Noah, buddy, don't run in the parking lot." Noah ran in the parking lot. Sienna caught him mid-launch, scooped him up under the arms, and spun him once before setting him down. It was a move that surprised her as much as it surprised Landon. He saw her blink when she put the boy down, as if she hadn't quite planned to do it and had caught herself in the middle of somebody else's gesture. "Hey, kid. You came." "I said I would." "You said you would last time, and you didn't." "Last time I had to work." "From where?" "My house." "You were home?" "Noah." Landon came up behind them with the orange slices. He met Sienna's eyes over the top of his son's head, and there was something there now, a new thing, something that had started in the boatyard that morning and had not gone away. "Hey." "Hi." "You're early." "I didn't want to miss the pregame." "There's no pregame." "Don't tell Noah that." Noah was already running toward his team on the field. The other dads, and they were mostly dads, at 6 o'clock on a weeknight in August, were gathering in a loose half-circle at the edge of the field, holding coffee cups and phones. Landon knew all of them, at least by face. He had grown up with 2 of them. The town, as towns did, had absorbed every detail of his life from the inside, which meant that Sienna Vale, walking up to the fence next to him, did not go unnoticed. He felt it the second they stepped onto the grass. The small pause in the conversation, the heads turning, casually, like this was just an ordinary evening check-in, like no one was staring. He had not, he realized, ever brought a woman to Noah's soccer game. Not once. Not in 3 years. "Landon," said Sienna, under her breath, "is everyone staring at me?" "Yes." "Cool. Cool, cool, cool." "Want to leave?" "No." "All right. I knew this was coming." "Did you?" "I live in a gossip column for a living, Landon. I know a small-town grapevine when I see one." "Used to live." "Yeah." They stood at the fence. Noah was on the field, in the blue and white jersey that said Harbor Point Youth in peeling iron-on letters across the back. He was, objectively, not a very good soccer player. He ran at the ball with enormous enthusiasm and limited coordination, and at one memorable point, kicked his own teammate in the shin while trying to score. Sienna laughed so hard at that she had to lean on the fence. "Oh my God," she said. Oh my God, Landon, he is terrible. I know. This is the best thing I've ever seen. You should see him play goalie. Please tell me there's video. There's a lot of video. She looked over at him. She was laughing, and her eyes were very bright. And for a second, he forgot to remember all the reasons he had listed for himself that morning about why this woman was a temporary woman. For a second, he just looked at her. She stopped laughing. Her face did something. It shifted. Not to the professional smile, not to the tired look, to something softer and more honest and much more frightening. Landon, she said. Yeah. I don't know what I'm doing. I know. I mean, with any of it. With the job thing. With this. With standing next to you at a soccer field like I'm somebody's person. I know. You're supposed to tell me to figure it out. You'll figure it out. That's not Sienna. What? Watch the game. She let out a breath. A small, broken, laughing breath. She turned back to the field. After a minute, her shoulder leaned just slightly against his. Not on purpose. Not performance. Just the drift of a tired body looking for something to rest against. He didn't move. On the field, Noah scored a goal. He scored it on the wrong goal. He kicked the ball into his own team's net, and he stood there for a stunned half-second before he realized what he'd done and turned around with his arms already up, shouting for Landon. Even the coach was laughing. Landon cupped his hands around his mouth. "That's my boy," Noah beamed. Sienna, beside him, let out a sound that was not exactly a laugh and not exactly a sob. Landon didn't look over at her. He let her have the second. When she spoke, her voice was almost steady. "I have to answer him, Landon." "Marcus?" "Yeah. I know. I don't know what I'm going to say. I know." She said yes, not that night. She said yes 3 days later at 4 in the afternoon, sitting in her kitchen in Harbor Point with her work phone on the counter and her personal phone face down on the table. She said yes in a calm, professional voice, the voice she had spent 10 years building, and she negotiated the start date out to mid-September. And when she hung up, she sat in her kitchen in the yellow house on Beacon, and she put her head down on her arms, and she cried in a way she had not let herself cry since she was 17 years old. She cried because she had said yes. She cried because she knew, going to have to tell Landon. She cried because she was 27 years old, and she had just told the first man in her life who had ever looked at her like she was a person, and the first child she had ever liked, that a magazine in Chicago was more important than they were. That wasn't what she had told Marcus, of course. What she had told Marcus was, "I'm thrilled, let's do it, September 15th, send me the paperwork." What she had told Marcus was the lie she had needed to tell herself to sign the deal before she lost her nerve. She sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Then she washed her face. Then she walked down to the boatyard. It was a Tuesday. Landon was under a boat when she walked in. She could see his legs, jeans, and boots sticking out from beneath the hull of a small runabout up on the blocks. Pete, the quiet employee, looked up from where he was coiling a hose, saw her face, and left. He just left. He went out the side door without saying anything, which was when Sienna understood, with a sick, hot drop in her stomach, that her face was very easy to read. "Landon." The legs stopped moving. "Yeah? Can you come out?" A pause. "Yeah," he said. "Hold on." He slid out from under the boat. He wiped his hands on a rag. He stood up, slowly, and when he turned to look at her, he didn't have to ask. He already knew. She saw him know it in the half-second before his face went carefully blank. "You said yes," he said. "Landon." "That's okay, Sienna. Don't do that. Don't do the that's okay thing. Don't." "What do you want me to do?" "I don't know." Yeah, they stood there, in the yard, with the smell of engine grease and salt water and someone's old coffee cup gone cold on the workbench. A gull cried outside. Somewhere a radio was playing so quietly she couldn't make out the song. "September 15th, she said. "I said September 15th. That's 5 weeks. "I have 5 weeks." "Okay. I'm not leaving tomorrow, Landon. I know. I wanted to tell you before I started pretending I hadn't said yes." "Okay. Say something." He looked at her. He really looked at her. For the first time since she had met him, he let her see something he was trying to hide. And what she saw on his face in that half second was not anger. Anger she could have handled. Anger she had handled her entire adult life. What she saw was a very old, very tired kind of grief. "You should have told me before you called him," he said. "I know. I would have told you to go." "I know. That's why I didn't." He nodded slowly. He looked down at his hands. He turned the rag over once, twice, a small fidget. "Does Noah know?" "No. Don't tell him yet." "Landon, I have to—" "Don't tell him yet, Sienna. Please. Let me get through one more week of him being happy, okay? Let me give him that." Her throat closed. "Okay. Okay." She stood there for another second. She wanted, very badly, to cross the 10 feet between them and put her hand on his face and tell him she had not meant it, that she would call Marcus back and say no, that she was staying, that she was hers. She wanted that so badly it hurt under her ribs. She didn't do it. She didn't do it because Landon Hayes had told her that morning in his office, weeks ago, "Whatever you decide it for you," and she had decided for her. She had decided for the 27-year-old woman who had spent 10 years getting somewhere, and she had picked that woman over the one who had just started in the last 6 weeks to become someone else. She didn't know yet which one of those women was real. She would not know for another 17 days. "I'll see you Saturday," she said. "Yeah." "Landon." "Yeah." "I'm sorry." He looked up. His eyes were wet. She hadn't seen that before, and she would, she knew, see it in her head for the next 10 years. "Don't be sorry to me," he said. "Be sorry to you." She walked out. She walked all the way back up Beacon Street in the late afternoon light, past the yellow house, past the point where the sidewalk ran out, all the way to the lighthouse at the end of the road. She sat on the rocks for an hour. She did not cry again. She was past crying. She sat with her arms around her knees and she watched the water do the thing water did. The long, slow hush and draw, and she tried very hard to remember what her apartment in Chicago looked like and found that she could not, at that moment, picture a single room in it. He told Noah on Wednesday night. He had to. Noah had been talking about Sienna all week. Sienna had promised to teach him how to skip stones. She had admitted to Noah, in a grave and solemn way, that she was bad at it, and Noah had announced that he would teach her, and they had made a formal appointment for Saturday morning. Landon could not let his son go to bed one more night counting down the days to a Saturday that was going to, eventually, be one of the last Saturdays. He sat on the edge of Noah's bed after story time. Noah was in his shark pajamas. Bartholomew the driftwood was on the pillow. The little sky-blue room was quiet. Outside, a moth was bumping against the window screen. "Bud." "Yeah." "I have to tell you something." "Okay." "It's not a bad thing necessarily, it's a thing." "Okay." "Sienna's going back to Chicago." Noah's face did not change for a long moment. He was processing. Landon had learned over 3 years that Noah did not react the way other kids reacted. Noah took information in and filed it and came back to it later, sometimes days later, with the question he hadn't thought to ask the first time. "When?" Noah said. "September 15th. "How many days is that?" "About 5 weeks." "Oh, she's got a job there, a big job. It's something she's been wanting to do for a long time." "Okay." Landon waited. Noah was looking at Bartholomew. He picked the driftwood up and turned it over in his hand. He looked at the little pen face Sienna had drawn on it. He set it back down. "Is she coming back?" Noah said. Landon opened his mouth to say, "I don't know." He closed it. He said, "I don't think so, Bud." Noah nodded, very slowly. He kept his face very still. He was, Landon realized with a slow drop in his chest, trying not to cry in front of his dad. He was 7 years old, and he was doing the thing adults did, the thing Landon had been doing for 3 years, the thing he had promised himself he would never teach his son to do. "Hey," Landon said softly. "Hey, buddy, it's okay. Come here." Noah came. He pressed his face into Landon's shirt, and he did not sob, did not wail, just shuddered once, hard, a small dry shudder that was worse than crying. "I liked her," Noah said, muffled. "I know. She was good at laughing. She was. Is she leaving because of us? Landon closed his eyes. No, buddy, no, it's not because of us. You promise? I promise. It was the first real lie he'd told his son in 3 years, and he knew it the second it left his mouth, and he held the boy tighter and did not take it back. Noah cried a little. Not a lot. He was quiet about it, and he was done in 3 minutes, and he pulled back and wiped his own nose on the back of his hand and said, in a very grown-up voice, Can we still see her on Saturday? Yeah, bud. Okay. Okay, try it. Landon put him to bed. He pulled the covers up to Noah's chin. He kissed his forehead. He turned out the lamp. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, looking at the small shape of his son in the dim blue room, at Bartholomew the driftwood on the pillow, at the window where the moth was still trying, patiently and stupidly, to get in. He closed the door. He walked down to the kitchen. He stood at the sink. He put both hands on the edge of the counter. He put his head down. He did not cry. He had not cried, not really, since the week after Emma died. And he was not going to start now, at 32, in his own kitchen, over a woman he had known for 6 weeks. But he stood there for a very long time, with his head down and his hands on the counter, and he understood that the thing he had been afraid of all along had already happened. It had happened somewhere between the storm and the soccer game. It had happened without his permission. It had happened to him and to Noah both at the same time, without either of them noticing, and now the only thing left to do was figure out how to survive it. He did not turn on the kitchen light. After a while he went out onto the porch and sat on the top step, the same step he had sat on the night he'd called Marin. The moon was up. The water was quiet. He could see, down the hill and 2 blocks over, a single square of yellow light burning in the kitchen window of the yellow house on Beacon Street, and he did not know whether he hoped she was awake in that kitchen or asleep somewhere beyond it, and he stopped trying after a while to know. The light in the yellow house did not go out for a very long time. 12:07. The yellow house light did finally go out, around 2 in the morning, but Sienna had not slept. She had sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open and a glass of wine she hadn't touched, and she had looked at flights to Chicago, and she had looked at her old apartment listing in her email. The one Marcus had forwarded her. Your old place is back on the market. Thought you might want it. And she had closed the laptop and opened it again 4 times without typing anything. At 2:30, she got up and went to bed. She didn't sleep then either. She lay in the dark and listened to the house settle around her, the yellow house she had been paying for by the month and had not, until that night, thought of as hers. She listened to the wind move through the scrub pines at the edge of the property. She listened to, far off, a ship's horn somewhere out past the point. Everything she heard, she noticed, she was hearing as if for the last time. She was pre-mourning it. She had 5 weeks, and already her brain was filing the sounds away like postcards. She did not know, yet, that 5 weeks was a generous estimate. Marcus called again on Thursday morning, and this time she answered. He did not sound like a man who had been told yes 3 days ago. He sounded like a man who had been told yes 3 days ago, and had already rewritten the entire terms of the agreement in his head. "Cy, we need you up here." "Marcus, I said September 15th. "I know what you said." So the board meeting is September 2nd, and if you're not at the September 2nd meeting, we can't announce you. And if we can't announce you by Labor Day, we lose the editorial cycle. And if we lose the editorial cycle, we've made your whole promotion into a footnote in the next relaunch. Marcus, and I cannot let you become a footnote, Sienna. Not on my watch, not after I fought for 3 weeks to... Marcus. He stopped. She was standing in her kitchen again, same kitchen, same counter, the kettle already whistling because she had been making coffee when the phone rang. She turned the kettle off. The whistle died. "What are you saying?" she said slowly. "I'm saying we need you here by the 29th. Of August?" "Yes." "That's 11 days." "I know." "Marcus, I told you 5 weeks. Cy, listen to me. Listen. I went to the wall for this. I went to the wall. You know what they were going to do if I didn't push you? They were going to hire Carla Reyes. Carla Reyes, Cy, from the Lifestyle Vertical. Over you. They had the paperwork drafted. I stopped it. I stopped it because I told them you were the face of the relaunch, and we needed you in the building before September 2nd, or the whole thing falls apart." She closed her eyes. This was the thing about Marcus Lenehan. This had always been the thing about Marcus Lenehan. He could make the urgency sound like affection. He could make you feel, when he was twisting your arm, like he was catching you before you fell. 11 days, she said. 11 days. I need to think about it. See, there's nothing to think about. You already said yes. I said yes for September, Marcus. I didn't say yes for Sienna. Sienna, breathe. You love this job. You have always loved this job. You called me crying when you were 23 because you wanted this job. Do you remember that? She did remember. She remembered very well. She had been 23 years old, renting a studio in Lincoln Park with 2 roommates because she could not afford to live alone. And she had called Marcus at 10 p.m. on a Sunday, and she had said, I want to run a magazine one day. I want to run yours. He had laughed, not unkindly, and he had told her she would, eventually, if she worked hard enough and made the right enemies and learned to stop apologizing for wanting what she wanted. She had. She had done all of those things. And now she was standing in a kitchen in a town the size of a postage stamp, and a man named Landon Hayes was going to be at his boatyard right now, and she had just remembered with a painful, specific clarity that the 23-year-old who had called Marcus crying was not the same person as the woman holding this phone. That was a new thought. She had not had it before. Okay, she said. Okay. Okay, 11 days, I'll be there. Sienna, you are saving my life. Sure, Marcus. I mean it, Sai. You are the future of this thing. I am telling you. I have to go. Sai, I have to go, Marcus. I'll email you later. She hung up. She set the phone down on the counter very, very carefully, as if it might explode. 11 days was a Saturday. The Saturday after next. That Saturday, she and Noah had already planned in the formal, notarized way that 7-year-olds plan things, to have a skipping stone competition with prizes. She had bought the prizes. She had bought them from the little gift shop on Main Street, 2 ridiculous plastic trophies with champion stamped on the front, because she had wanted to see Noah's face when she handed him the loser one just to make him laugh. She had planned 8 more Saturdays with a 7-year-old. She was now going to get 1 more. And she had not, even now, told Landon that the number was going to keep shrinking. She stood in her kitchen. The sun had come up while she was on the phone. The light in the room was the good early light, the clean light, the light she had started waking up for. She put both hands on the counter. She leaned forward. She did not cry. She was, she realized distantly, running out of tears for this situation. She had already used most of them the night before. She picked up the phone. She did not call Landon. And that would be one of the things later that she would not be able to forgive herself for. She could have called him. She could have walked down to the boatyard that morning and told him the truth. She could have said, Marcus moved it up. I've got 11 days. Help me figure out how to tell Noah. She didn't. She spent the next 8 days not telling him. She told herself at first that she was protecting Noah. Landon had asked her, hadn't he, to let the boy be happy for 1 more week. Well, she was letting him be happy. She was showing up on Saturday in jeans and a sweatshirt with the prizes hidden in a grocery bag, and she was standing on the beach teaching a 7-year-old how to wing a flat rock across the surface of the water, and she was laughing in the right places. And she was not in any visible way. The woman who had 3 days earlier accepted a promotion she did not actually anymore want. Landon knew. He knew the first time she didn't meet his eyes. He didn't say anything that Saturday. He let it play out. He let Noah win the stone skipping competition by a 3-stone margin because Sienna was, as advertised, bad at it. Or maybe Landon thought, letting herself be bad at it, the way she let herself do a lot of things in Noah's presence that she wouldn't have let herself do anywhere else. He let Sienna hand Noah a trophy with champion on it, and he watched Noah clutch it in both small hands and announced that he was going to put it on his shelf right next to the driftwood face. He watched Sienna stand there with her arms wrapped around herself in an August wind that wasn't that cold, and he watched her look at Noah like she was trying to burn him into the back of her eyes. And he said nothing. He said nothing when she hugged Noah goodbye too long. He said nothing when she said, over Noah's head, I'll see you next Saturday, okay? And he said nothing when Noah nodded and Sienna flinched, a small flinch she tried to hide in the hug. He waited until Noah was down the beach, out of earshot, chasing a goal that was not going to let itself be caught. Then he said, "When?" She froze. "What? When are you actually leaving, Sienna?" She looked at him. She looked at him. And she did the thing she had been practicing on herself in the mirror for 4 days, which was breathing steadily through the middle of her chest, and she said, "Landon, don't do the thing." "The thing? The whatever you're about to do. I don't, Sienna, look at me. When?" Her mouth worked. "Tuesday," she said. "Tuesday. Tuesday after next. The 29th. He moved it up. Marcus called Thursday. He said if I wasn't there by the 29th, it wouldn't happen. And I said, you said yes." "I said yes, Landon." He exhaled through his nose. He looked out at the water, at his son chasing the uncatchable gull down the tide line. He didn't say anything for a long time. His jaw was working in the way it worked when he was trying very hard not to say the first thing that came to him. "How long did you know?" he said finally. 4 days? 4 days? Landon, 9 days. You had 9 Saturdays with my son, and you're giving him 2. You had 2, and you sat on that for 4 of them, and you came to the beach today and laughed at his jokes like nothing. Don't. Like nothing was wrong. Don't. What, Sienna? Don't what? Don't be upset? Don't pretend you didn't know. He stopped. She hadn't meant to say that. It came out of her before she could catch it. And the second it was out, she understood it was the most dangerous thing she could have said, because it was also true. "What did you just say to me?" he said, very quietly. "You knew, Landon. You've known for a week. Don't pretend I blindsided you." "I didn't know it was 11 days. You knew it was going to get worse. You knew. You knew, and you didn't ask. And don't stand there and act like I'm the only... My kid is 7 years old." "I know. My kid is 7 years old, Sienna, and you let him plan a stone-skipping competition 11 days before you were going to tell him you're not coming back. Stop. You let him give his trophy a place on his shelf. Stop." Her voice broke. He stopped. They stood there. The wind was doing what it did. 20 yards down the beach, Noah had given up on the gull and was examining a piece of driftwood with the intensity of a man appraising a used car. He was out of earshot, but he was not out of sight, and both of them remembered, at the same moment, that he could turn around. Sienna wiped her face with the back of her hand hard. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know. I didn't know how to tell him. I know. I was going to tell him tonight." He looked at her. He was not quite crying, but his eyes were doing the thing she had seen once before, in the boatyard, and she understood with a sick, helpless certainty that she had done that to him. Twice. She had done that to him twice now. "Tell him tonight," Landon said. "Landon, tell him tonight. No more Saturdays of him not knowing. You don't get to eat up what little time he has left with a surprise. Do you hear me? You tell him tonight, and then you give him a week to be a kid who's sad instead of a kid who's been lied to." "I wasn't lying to him. You were lying to him, Sienna." She closed her eyes. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. Tonight. 7 o'clock. Come over after dinner." "Okay. Don't bring anything. Don't bring him a gift. Don't make it a thing. Just come over and tell him the truth." "Okay. I'll be there." "Okay?" He turned away from her then. He walked down the beach toward his son, and Noah saw him coming and waved the driftwood at him like a sword, shouting something Sienna couldn't hear. And Landon bent down and picked the boy up and settled him onto one hip, the way he had been doing since the boy was 3 years old. And the two of them walked back up the beach past her without stopping. And Sienna Vale stood on the sand in her sweatshirt and her bad jeans with her arms wrapped around herself and watched the only family she had been part of in 2 decades walk away from her. She came at 7. She wore her own clothes, not the Chicago clothes, not the performance clothes. A soft gray cardigan over a t-shirt, jeans, the sneakers she'd bought in town. She had washed her face. She had not put on makeup. She stood on the porch of the little blue shuttered house on Gull Street for 30 seconds before she made herself knock. Landon opened the door. He had been watching for her. She could see it in his face. He had been sitting on the couch inside with his hands on his knees, trying to decide what he was going to say when she walked in, and now here she was, and he had not decided. "Hey," he said. "Hey." "He's in the living room." "Okay." "I made tea, if you want tea." "I'm okay." "Okay." She stepped inside. She had been in the house exactly once before, on a Sunday in July, when Landon had invited her over for what he called pancakes, the Noah Hayes special, and she had eaten 3 of them, and Noah had shown her his Lego collection, and she had thought, sitting on the floor of his bedroom with a plastic pirate in her hand, I could do this. I could do this for the rest of my life. She had not told Landon that, at the time. She had not told anyone that, at the time. It was the clearest thought she had ever had, and she had stepped around it like stepping around a hole in the floor. Noah came down the hall with Bartholomew the driftwood in one hand. He was in pajamas already, the shark ones, and his hair was wet from his bath, and he had put on, Sienna noticed, his good slippers, the corduroy ones with the fox faces that he only wore when he wanted to make an impression. "Hi," he said. "Hi, buddy. Dad said you were coming." "Yeah." "He said you had something to tell me." "Yeah." Noah nodded seriously. He sat down on the couch. He set Bartholomew on the cushion next to him, very carefully, facing forward. He patted the cushion on his other side in a gesture that was so obviously an imitation of something Landon did that Sienna had to press her lips together. She sat down next to him. Landon stayed standing. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, eyes on her. He didn't help. He was not going to help. This was the deal, she understood. She had made this mess. She was going to speak it out loud in front of the 7-year-old she had charmed and the man she had, whatever she had done to him, and she was going to do it without any help. "Noah," she said, "I have to tell you something, and it's not fun." "Okay. Remember how I told you I was in town for a little while, and I had a job in Chicago?" "Yeah." "I have to go back to the job sooner than I thought." Noah's small forehead wrinkled. "How much sooner?" "Tuesday." "This Tuesday?" "Tuesday after next." Noah counted on his fingers. His lips moved. He got to 11 and he stopped and he looked up at her with eyes that were, Sienna saw, very round and very shiny. 11 days, he said. "Yeah." "But you said, I know what I said, buddy. You said the stone skipping was going to be every Saturday." "I know." "You said we were going to do it next Saturday, too." "I know." "Why did you say that if you were leaving?" Her mouth opened, her mouth closed. Landon, against the doorframe, did not move, did not save her. "I said it," Sienna said very slowly, "because I didn't want to think about not coming, so I pretended I was coming. And that was not fair of me to say because I was lying. I was lying to make myself feel better." Noah considered this. He was good at considering. He had gotten this from his father, Sienna realized, right in that moment, the way Landon had considered the whole question of her, for 6 weeks, before letting himself look at her on that soccer field the way he had. Noah was Landon's son in 100 small ways she had cataloged without noticing she was cataloging. "Are you lying now?" he said. "Nobody." "Are you going to come back?" The pause before she answered was the worst pause of Sienna Vale's life. "I don't know," she said. "I want to, but I don't know." "That's not yes." "I know it's not yes. My mom didn't come back." He said it very quietly. He said it looking at his hands. He said it the way he might say a thing he had been carrying for a long time and had not been allowed to put down. "I know," Sienna said. "Dad says that's different. Dad says Mom didn't mean to go." "I know. But she still didn't come back." "Buddy. So if you say you don't know, it's probably no." He said it as a statement of fact. He was 7 years old. He had done the math. He was holding Bartholomew the driftwood with both hands now, turning it over and over in his lap. And he was not crying because he had learned from a dad who had learned it too early how to sit very still with a thing that hurt. Sienna put her hand over her mouth. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "It's okay." "It is not okay, Noah." "It is." "It is not." "It is," Noah said, and his voice was steady. And he was a better person than she was. He was a better person than she was, and the understanding came down on her like a wall falling. "It is." Because you didn't know. Dad said sometimes people don't know, so you didn't know. It's okay. She couldn't answer. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against the top of his small head. She stayed there. She stayed there for a long time. Noah let her. He did not move. He just sat with Bartholomew in his lap and let the woman who had been coming to his beach for 6 weeks cry into his wet hair, and after a minute, she would remember this. She would remember this for the rest of her life. His small hand came up and patted her shoulder, twice. An adult pat, the way Landon patted him when he woke up from a bad dream. She pulled back. Her face was wet. "I have to go," she said. "Okay," said Noah. "Can I give you a hug?" "Yeah." She hugged him. She hugged him tightly, and not for as long as she wanted to, and when she pulled away, he handed her Bartholomew. "For you," he said. "Noah, that's yours. You need him more." She took the driftwood. She held it in her hand. The little pen-drawn face looked up at her. "I'll bring him back," she said. "Okay. I promise." "Okay." She stood up. She didn't look at Landon. She couldn't look at Landon. She walked to the door. She opened it. She stepped out onto the porch, and Landon followed her, and he closed the door behind them so that Noah wouldn't hear. They stood on the porch. The street was quiet. The light over the door was yellow. A moth was already at it. "Landon," she said, "don't." "Landon, Sienna, don't. Don't do this part. You've done enough tonight. Go home." "Okay." "Go home." "Okay." She went. She walked down the porch steps with Bartholomew in her hand, and she walked back up the street toward Beacon. And she did not look back. And she did not hear the door close behind her, which meant Landon was watching her go. He was watching her go until she was out of sight. She knew because when she got to the corner, she finally looked back, and he was still there. Tuesday the 29th came up fast. She packed the yellow house in 2 days. Most of it had not been unpacked to begin with. Her clothes went back into the 2 suitcases they had come in. Her laptop, her chargers, the cookbook she had bought at the little shop on Main Street and only used once. She left a note for the landlord. She left a house key on the kitchen table and a bottle of wine next to it as an apology for breaking the lease early, which she had not mentioned yet and was going to mention by email on her drive back. She did not go back to the boatyard. She did not go back to the beach. She drove past the boatyard on her way out of town at 6:30 on Tuesday morning because it was on the only road out. Landon's truck was already in the lot. She didn't stop. She made herself not stop. She drove past, and she watched the yard disappear in her rearview mirror, and she drove. She drove for 2 hours before she made it to the interstate. She drove for 4 hours before she pulled off at a rest stop outside Buffalo, and she sat in her car in a parking lot with trucks rumbling around her, and she took Bartholomew the driftwood out of her purse and set him on the dashboard. "Well," she said to him. Bartholomew did not answer. She thought about what Landon would be doing right now. He would be at the yard. Pete would have come in at 8. They would be pulling a sailboat up on the blocks, probably. There was a sloop coming in this week, she knew, because he had mentioned it, because she had listened, because she had listened to everything. Noah would be at his summer day camp at the rec center. Noah would be building something out of popsicle sticks. Noah would be, at some point today, asking a counselor if he could call his dad because he missed him, and Landon would take the call at the yard, and Landon would say, "Yeah, buddy, I miss you too. Come on home at 3. And the 2 of them would have dinner together tonight without her, for the first time in 6 weeks, and they would both, quietly, notice that the chair she had been sitting in was empty. She put her head down on the steering wheel. She did not cry. She was sitting with both hands flat on the wheel and her forehead on her knuckles, and she was thinking very slowly, very deliberately about the meeting she was driving to, September 2nd. The editorial board. She had been sent an agenda. She had the agenda in her email. She had opened it at 7 this morning in the Yellow House kitchen. She had looked at it. She had made herself look at it because the agenda was supposed to remind her why she had said yes. It had not reminded her. The agenda was 12 bullet points about a magazine's fall relaunch. She had stared at the 12 bullet points, and she had felt nothing. Not dread, not excitement, nothing. She had felt, she realized now, in the rest stop parking lot outside Buffalo with a piece of driftwood on her dashboard, exactly the way she had felt in April when she had sat at her desk in Chicago and understood, with the dull clarity of a person finally answering their own question, that she did not want to do this job for one more day. That was the thing she had forgotten. In the rush of being wanted again, in the urgency of Marcus on the phone, in the muscle memory of saying yes, she had forgotten the small, clear things she had known in April. She did not want this job. She had never wanted this job. She had wanted to be the person who had this job. She had wanted the story. She had wanted the list, the list, the list. The 30 under 30, the 40 under 40, the name in print, the proof. And somewhere along the way, she had mistaken the proof for the life. Harbor Point had not given her the proof. Harbor Point had given her the life. She lifted her head off the steering wheel. Her hands were shaking. She looked at Bartholomew. Bartholomew looked back. "Oh no," she said out loud, in the car, to the piece of driftwood. "Oh no, oh no, oh no." She sat there for another minute. Then she turned the key. She did not get back on the interstate heading west. She pulled out of the rest stop parking lot, and she drove down the exit ramp, and she looped around, and she got back on the interstate heading east. She drove. She did not call Marcus. She would have to call Marcus. She would have to call Marcus and tell him she was not coming to the September 2nd meeting, not the 15th, not ever. And Marcus was going to say things that were going to be very hard to hear, because Marcus was very good at saying things that were very hard to hear. She would let him. She had earned the right to sit through that phone call. She had earned it by being, for 10 years, a person who said yes to a man like Marcus Lenehan, and she had also earned, just barely, in the last 8 hours, the right to not be that person anymore. She did not call Landon. She did not call Landon because she did not know, yet, if Landon Hayes would open the door when she got there. She had told his son she didn't know if she was coming back. She had told his son 11 days ago. She had driven away from the town at dawn like a woman who had chosen. And now she was coming back, and she was coming back without permission, and there was a real, terrible, entirely reasonable possibility that the man on the porch of the little blue shuttered house on Gull Street was going to look at her through his screen door and tell her she was too late. She drove anyway. She drove through the long, flat afternoon. She drove with her phone face down on the passenger seat because Marcus was going to call her any minute, because the board meeting was in 4 days and she was supposed to be in Chicago tonight, and someone at the office was going to notice she was not where she was supposed to be. She let the phone buzz. She let it buzz 3 times. She did not pick up. The light changed. The afternoon went gold. She passed the sign for Erie. She did not stop. She drove with Bartholomew on the dashboard and the windows cracked and the smell of the interstate going past, and she thought about Noah's small hand patting her shoulder, and she thought about Landon's face at the door, and she thought, over and over, please be home, please be home, please be home. She crossed the state line into New York as the sun started going down. She still had 6 hours to go. She kept driving, and in Harbor Point, 1,000 miles east of where she had stopped in Buffalo, Landon Hayes closed up the boatyard at 6, and he picked up his son from day camp, and he walked him home holding his small hand, and Noah asked, quietly, without looking up, "Is she in Chicago yet, Dad?" And Landon said, "Yeah, bud, I think so." And the two of them walked down Gull Street in the long summer evening with the gulls crying over the harbor and the light going the color of warm metal on the water. And neither of them knew yet that a woman in a blue car on an interstate in Pennsylvania was driving, just then, past the exit for Erie, going the wrong way for everything she had spent 10 years trying to be, and the right way, for the first time in her life, towards something that was going to ask her to stay. She pulled onto Gull Street at 20 past 1 in the morning. The town was asleep. Harbor Point had gone to bed hours ago, and the only thing awake on the street was the porch light on the little blue shuttered house and a single square of warm yellow at the front window. Landon's truck sat in the driveway. Sienna shut off the engine in front of the house and sat there with both hands on the wheel, and she did not get out. For almost 10 minutes she did not get out. She had driven 1,000 miles with a piece of driftwood on her dash, and a story she had rehearsed and rejected and rehearsed again, and now that she was here, the story had all fallen out of her head. There were no words in her anymore. There was only the porch light, and the man she knew was on the other side of that door, and the child asleep upstairs who had handed her the last thing he loved and told her she needed him more. She got out of the car. She walked up the path. Her legs didn't feel like her legs. She climbed the porch steps. She stood at the door. She lifted her hand. She held it there for a second. Then she knocked. She heard him before she saw him. A chair scraping, a footstep, the small lamp moving as he passed it. The door opened 4 inches and then stopped, and Landon Hayes looked at her through the screen with the same unhurried, unreadable attention he had looked at her with on a beach 6 weeks and 4 lifetimes ago, and he did not open the door the rest of the way. "No," he said. "Landon." "Sienna, no. I'm not in Chicago. I can see that. I didn't go." "Sienna, I can see that." She swallowed. "I turned around in Buffalo," she said. "Okay. I sat in a rest stop and I looked at the driftwood and I—" "Sienna, stop." She stopped. He was not letting her in. She understood that. His hand was on the inside of the screen door, and he was not moving his hand, and the 4 inches of gap between the door and the frame were all she was going to get from him tonight. "It's 1 a.m, he said. "I know. My kid is asleep. I know. You drove 1,000 miles to stand on my porch at 1 a.m. without calling." "Yes." "Why?" "Because I didn't know if you'd answer the phone." "I wouldn't have." "I know." He looked at her for a long second. He looked tired. He looked older than he had 10 days ago, and she hated that she could see on his face the shape of the 10 days he'd spent without her. "Go to the yellow house," he said. "Landon, go to the yellow house. If you left your key on the kitchen table, go break a window. I don't care. Go there, sleep. Come to the yard tomorrow at 8 if you mean it. Don't stand on my porch tonight and make me be the one who decides anything. Okay?" "I mean it, Sienna." "I know." 8 a.m. "Okay." He closed the door. The porch light did not go off, though. It stayed on, and she understood, standing there with her hand still half raised, that the light was not for the moth. She went back to the car. She drove the 2 blocks to Beacon. She let herself into the yellow house with the spare key she'd hidden under the flower pot like a 16-year-old, and she lay down on the bed in her clothes, and she did not sleep, and she did not cry. And at 4 a.m, she got up and made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with Bartholomew and watched the dark come apart into the pearl-colored light she had come to know by heart. She was at the boatyard at 7:40. Landon showed up at 8:05. Pete took one look at her standing in the lot and made a sound like a man who had miscalculated his morning, and he turned his truck around and left without getting out. Landon watched him go. He walked past Sienna without looking at her. He unlocked the office. He held the door. She went in. He didn't pour her coffee this time. He sat down behind the desk, not on the edge of it. The desk was between them. That was on purpose. "Talk," he said. She talked. She told him about Buffalo. She told him about the agenda. She told him about Marcus on the phone and the 23-year-old girl who had called him crying in the Lincoln Park apartment. And she told him that somewhere between then and now the girl had died, and she had been running a dead girl's errands for 4 years without noticing. She told him she had called Marcus at a gas station in Erie and said no, and that Marcus had said things to her that she was not going to repeat, and that she had hung up on him and driven the last 500 miles with her phone turned off. She told him she did not know what she was asking for. She told him she was not asking to be forgiven, yet because she had not earned that. She told him she was asking only to be allowed to stay in Harbor Point and try. He listened. He did not interrupt. When she was done, he sat with his hands flat on the desk, and he looked past her at the window for a long time, and the boatyard clock on the wall made its small, tired ticking in the quiet. "I can't let you hurt him again," he said. "I know. If you decide in February that you miss it, if Marcus calls you with something bigger, if one of those magazine people shows up with a check, Landon, I mean it, Sienna. I am not going to watch my son learn twice that the people he loves leave." "I know. So don't tell me what you want right now. Don't tell me you're sure. Tell me what you're willing to give up to be sure." She thought about it. She took her time. She did not perform the answer. "The apartment," she said. "The lease is up next month. I'll let it go. I'll put my stuff in storage. I'll sell what I don't need. I'll take the yellow house through the winter. I'll sign a year on it. I have savings, Landon. I'm not going to be a burden." "That's not what I asked you." "I know. I'm getting there." "Okay. The job. Marcus already knows. It's done. But there's going to be noise. There's going to be a press person who wants a quote. There's going to be my mother, who is going to have a very loud opinion. I'll handle all of it. I'm not asking you to help me handle any of it. Okay. And she stopped. She made herself stop. She looked at him. I'm not going to ask to see Noah until you tell me I can. His head came up. What? I'm not going to ask. Landon, I broke that kid's heart. I know I did. I'm not going to walk back onto that beach on Saturday like nothing happened. He gets to decide when he wants to see me, and you get to decide when he's ready, and I'll wait. I'll wait as long as that takes. He looked at her for a long, long moment. That's the first thing you've said this morning that I believe, he said. She let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Okay, she whispered. Okay. So you wait, okay? And you don't hang around the house? And you don't show up at day camp? And you don't bump into him at the grocery on purpose? I won't. I'll tell him you're back. When? Tonight, after dinner. I'll tell him the truth. I'll tell him you came back and you're going to be in town, and that if he wants to see you, he can tell me. And if he doesn't want to see you, he can tell me that too, and I'll respect whatever he says. Okay. Sienna. Yeah, it might take him a while. I know. It might take him a lot of whiles. I know, Landon. He rubbed a hand over his face. For a second she saw it. The part of him he did not let her see. The exhausted part. The part that had spent 11 nights alone in a kitchen. Okay, he said, quieter. Okay. Go home, Sienna. Go home and sleep. Don't come back here tomorrow. Give us the week. She nodded. She stood up. She was almost to the door before she turned around. Landon? Yeah. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. She went. Noah did not send for her for 6 days. On the 7th day, a Wednesday, Landon walked into the Yellow House kitchen at 5 in the afternoon, holding his son by the hand, and Noah stood in the doorway in his corduroy fox slippers and looked at Sienna across the table and did not smile. Hi, he said. Hi, buddy. Dad said you came back. Yeah, I came back. You said you didn't know. I know. And then you came back. Yeah. He considered this. He always considered. He was his father's son in the slow, sober weighing of things, and she had missed him with a physical ache in the center of her chest for 6 days, and she was not, she knew, allowed to say so yet. Are you going to leave again? Noah said. She opened her mouth. She closed it. Landon was behind him, not saying anything, watching her. She understood with the same clarity she had understood it in the car in Buffalo that she was not allowed to promise. I don't want to, she said. That's not yes. I know it's not yes, Noah. I can't say yes the way you want me to. Nobody can. But I can tell you that I'm going to try to stay. Every day. I'm going to try. And if I'm having a day where it's hard to try, I'm going to tell your dad about it. And he's going to tell me to try harder. And I'm going to try harder. Okay. Is that enough? Noah thought about it for a very long time. Then he walked across the kitchen, and he climbed up into the chair next to her, and he set Bartholomew the driftwood on the table between them, face toward her. He missed you, Noah said, her eyes filled. I missed him too. He's still yours. Noah, for a while. He can stay with you until. Until what, buddy? Until you're sure. She put her hand flat on the table next to his small one. She didn't touch him. She waited. After a second, Noah put his hand on top of hers. Not a hug, not a grab, just a small, warm weight, the way a boy who was still careful with her would let her know he was here. Behind him, in the doorway, Landon leaned his shoulder against the frame and finally exhaled. Trying, it turned out, was not romantic. Trying was her in the Yellow House at 6 in the morning on a Thursday in October, with a sweater pulled over her pajamas, on the phone with a realtor in Chicago about the apartment she could not, it turned out, legally break the lease on without a penalty that took 2 months of her savings with it. Trying was her sitting across from a lawyer in Providence explaining why she needed someone to look over the severance package Marcus had emailed her, because she did not trust herself to read it without crying. Trying was signing a year's lease on the Yellow House, which the landlord accepted with the startled, pleased expression of a man who hadn't expected to rent his summer place through January. Trying was showing up for things. She had not, in her entire adult life, shown up for anything. Not really. She had performed showing up. She had done the version of showing up where you got the credit and the photograph and the mention in the newsletter and then went home. And she had mistaken that for the thing itself for so long that she had to learn, at 27, how to do it without the reward. So she showed up. She showed up at Noah's parent-teacher night in October after Landon asked her if she wanted to come. She sat in a child-sized chair next to him in Mrs. Albright's classroom, and she listened to Mrs. Albright say that Noah was a bright, sensitive boy who had started, in the last few weeks, participating more in group work, and Sienna kept her hands very still in her lap and did not claim any credit for anything. She showed up at soccer. Not for the applause. She stood at the fence now without the small crowd of staring dads behind her, because the crowd had gotten bored of her in late September and had moved on to a new piece of gossip about the new second-grade teacher's divorce, and Sienna had never in her life been so grateful to be replaced. She showed up at the boatyard on Tuesday mornings because Landon had, very slowly and very reluctantly, admitted that he needed help with the books. His accountant had retired. Sienna, who had run the budget for a $12 million editorial operation, had laughed so hard she'd choked on her coffee. "Landon, you're asking me to do your QuickBooks." "I'm not asking. You're extremely asking. I'll trade you." "For what?" "I'll take Noah to his dentist appointment next Tuesday so you can drive to Providence to sign whatever you're signing." "Deal." "Done." They shook on it, over his desk, and for a minute she was 23 years old again, and the world was small and the deal was simple, and she understood with a sudden quiet clarity that she had not felt this version of herself in 4 years. She learned his books in 2 weeks. She learned them fast. She learned that he had been underbilling a marina in New Bedford for 3 years, and she told him so, and he said, "Huh," in a tone that meant he had suspected it and hadn't wanted to find out. She wrote him a new invoice template. She set up autopay for his utilities. She did not make it a production. One Tuesday in mid-November, he came into the office with 2 coffees from the place on Main and set one of them on her side of the desk without saying anything. And it was a very small thing, but she sat with the cup in her hands for a minute after he left the room, and she understood that something had shifted. Noah shifted slower. He was careful with her. He did not lunge at her the way he used to. He did not grab her hand in parking lots. He did not jump on her back the way he had jumped on her back once, in August, and knocked her into the surf. He was kinder in some ways than he had been. He was very polite. But the politeness was a distance, and Sienna understood the distance, and she did not try to close it. She let him close it. He closed it in inches. He closed it in October when he asked her if she wanted to see his Halloween costume before his dad saw it, because his dad was going to say it was too scary. He closed it in early November when he left her a drawing on her porch, a drawing of 3 stick figures on a beach, her and him and his dad, labeled S, N, and D. Without saying anything about it, just left it on the welcome mat on a Monday morning for her to find. She had cried over the drawing for 20 minutes and then put it in a frame from the drugstore and hung it by her kitchen window. He closed it the Saturday after Thanksgiving when he asked her to come over for pancakes. "Noah Hayes special?" she said at the door. "Duh," said Noah. She made it through 1.5 before she had to excuse herself to the bathroom to cry in a way neither of them would see. And when she came back, Landon had poured her a second cup of coffee without comment, and Noah was telling her, at great length, about a squid documentary he had seen in school, and she understood, sitting there at the table with her hands around the warm mug, that this was the thing. This was the thing she had turned around in Buffalo for. Not a grand moment, not a reconciliation scene on a beach, pancakes on a Saturday, a boy with syrup on his chin, a man who had poured her coffee. Landon did not kiss her through all of this. He did not touch her. He did not sit too close. He did not look at her across rooms with anything anyone else in town would have been able to name. He was, Sienna understood, watching. He was watching the way he had watched her from 10 feet away on a beach in August. And he was not going to move toward her until he knew, not until he was told, not until she proved it, but until he knew that she was not going to disappear. She didn't push. She didn't push because she understood now that she had not earned the pushing. She had earned the waiting. The Saturday before Christmas, she found him in the yard after closing, standing over the sloop he was supposed to have splashed in October and hadn't. She brought 2 coffees. She set one on the gunwale. "You'd better not be here to fire me from the books," she said. "I'd never. I saved you $8,000 on that marina account. I know what you saved me. Sit down." She hoisted herself up onto the gunwale next to him. He didn't look at her for a long time. He looked at the boat. He ran his hand along the rail, the way he did when he was working something out. The yard was quiet. The light was the thin blue December light that made the harbor look like a photograph. "I'm not good at this part," he said. "What part?" "The part where I tell you something." "Okay. I need to say this wrong. I need to just say it, and it's going to come out wrong, so don't hold it against me." "Landon, Sienna, I'm not holding anything against you ever again, that's the deal." He almost smiled. Almost. He put his hand on the rail of the boat next to hers, not touching. She could feel, she thought, the heat of him across the half-inch of wood. "I was in love with you in August," he said. Her breath caught. "Okay." "I was in love with you by the storm, the one in the office. I knew it before you said anything about Noah's mom. I knew it when I gave you the shirt." "Landon, don't say anything. I'm getting there." "Okay. I was in love with you in August, and I was in love with you when you left, and I was in love with you the whole time you were gone, and I was in love with you when you stood on my porch at 1 a.m., and the reason I didn't let you in that night was because if I let you in that night, I was going to tell you this. And I didn't trust it yet. I didn't trust you yet. I know. And I've spent 4 months watching you not run, and I've spent 4 months waiting to see if I was going to stop. And I didn't stop." Her eyes were blurring. "Okay," she whispered. I'm not asking you for anything right now. I don't want you to say anything. I wanted you to know, before Christmas, before the year ends. I wanted it on the record." "On the record?" she repeated. "Yeah." She looked at the harbor. She looked at the winter light. She thought about Buffalo, and about the 23-year-old girl who had thought a magazine was the top of the world, and about the 7-year-old who had patted her shoulder twice while she cried into his hair. "Landon," she said. "Yeah. I'm not going anywhere." "I know. I'm not going anywhere." "I know, Sienna. I know you know. I'm telling myself. Let me say it. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere." He laughed, once, short. It was a laugh she hadn't heard in months. He took her hand. Not for a long time. Just for a second. He lifted her hand off the gunwale and he held it, the back of it, and he pressed his thumb along the edge of her knuckle once, and then he let go. It was the first time he had touched her since August. She was going to remember it, she knew, until she died. They sat there for a long time in the winter light, in the yard, on the rail of a boat that was not going to see the water again until spring, and neither of them said anything else. They didn't need to. They had 9 weeks until March, and the whole year behind them, and a boy at home who was going to come down for breakfast tomorrow in his shark pajamas and ask if Sienna was coming to pancakes again, and she was going to say yes. She was going to keep saying yes. She kept saying yes, and the winter gave way. And the first thing Sienna Vale understood about staying somewhere was that staying was mostly boring. It was laundry. It was the grocery on Main. It was remembering that the boatyard space heater tripped the breaker if you plugged the coffee pot in at the same time. It was driving Noah to a birthday party at a bowling alley in the next town over and sitting on a molded plastic bench for 2 hours beside a woman named Denise, who turned out to be the mother of a boy Noah would eventually break his wrist with on a skateboard in April. Staying was small. Staying had no applause track. She had not known before that this was the secret. She had spent her 20s at a dead run chasing a feeling she'd mistaken for meaning, the promotion, the list, the name in print. And the feeling had never come, because the feeling did not live in any of those places. The feeling lived in a kitchen on a Wednesday night with a 7-year-old doing multiplication tables at the table while a man stirred something on the stove and the radio was on too low to hear. The feeling lived in the boring. She had missed it for 10 years because she had been trained to look somewhere louder. The trouble came, as trouble does, in March. It came in the form of a letter. Landon opened it at the kitchen table on a Tuesday morning, and Sienna watched his face go still in the specific way it went still when he was trying to keep Noah from noticing. Noah was in the other room putting on his shoes for school. Landon folded the letter back along its crease very neatly and slid it under the salt shaker and said, "Bud, you got the blue folder?" "Yeah, Dad." "Lunchbox?" "Yeah, Dad." "I'll walk you." He walked Noah the 4 blocks to the elementary school, and Sienna did not touch the letter while he was gone, though she sat at the table staring at it for the whole 12 minutes. When he came back in, he poured himself a cup of coffee, sat down across from her, slid the letter out from under the salt shaker, and handed it to her without a word. It was from a lawyer in Boston. The letter was 3 paragraphs long and polite in the way only very expensive legal correspondence was polite. The gist of it was that Harbor Point's waterfront was being eyed by a development group called Crescent Bay Partners, that Crescent Bay Partners was in the process of acquiring a set of parcels along the north side of the harbor, and that Landon Hayes's parcel, the boatyard, and the 3/4 of an acre it sat on, which his father had bought in 1981, was one of the parcels they wanted. There was an offer. It was generous, the letter said. The lawyer hoped Mr. Hayes would consider it carefully. The lawyer also noted, in a paragraph that Sienna read twice, that the town's zoning board would be considering a rezoning petition at its April meeting that would, if passed, change the permitted use of the North Harbor waterfront from mixed light industrial to residential commercial. Crescent Bay was, the letter noted, confident the petition would pass. Sienna set the letter down. "They're trying to zone you out." "Yep." "If the rezoning passes, you can't run the yard." "Nope." "And if you can't run the yard, the offer is what I can get." Landon: "Yep." He said it all in the same flat tone, but she could see his jaw. He put his hand over his mouth, the way he did when he was trying not to say something, and he looked out the window at the backyard, and she watched him do the math he had probably already done in his head in the 4 minutes before he had opened the envelope, which was the math of a man who had inherited a thing from his father, and now had to decide whether to sell it to a stranger. She sat very still. She had learned by then how to sit very still. "What do we do?" she said. He looked at her. It was the we that did it. Not the sympathy, not the question. The we. She had said we, which was the first time she had said we about anything that mattered, and Landon Hayes, who had not cried in front of her in 9 months, had to swallow once before he could answer. "I don't know," he said. "Okay." "I don't know yet, Sienna." Okay, can I look at this? Can I read the whole thing?" "Yeah." "Can I make some calls, like?" "Sienna, I'm not going to make them about you. I'm going to make them about Crescent Bay. I want to know who they are. Is that all right?" He looked at her. She saw him weigh it. She saw him weigh very specifically the thing she had been waiting 7 months for him to weigh, which was whether he was going to let her actually stand inside the fight with him, or whether he was going to hold her, still, a half step outside. She had been a half step outside on purpose. That had been the deal. He set the pace. He said when. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, go ahead, make the calls." And that was that. She went back to the yellow house, and she opened her laptop for the first time in 4 months, the real laptop, the work laptop, the one with the VPN and the contacts and the research tools she had told Marcus she was not going to need anymore. She opened it, and she sat at the kitchen table, and she cracked her knuckles the way she used to crack them before a big edit, and she got to work. She was Sienna Vale again for 4 days. Not the version of Sienna Vale who had been Marcus Lenehan's ambition wrapped in a pencil skirt. The other one, the sharp-eyed one, the one who, at 24, had broken a story about a hotel chain laundering money through a non-profit and had been blackballed out of travel writing for a year because of it. That one. She found out a great deal about Crescent Bay Partners. She found out that Crescent Bay was, on paper, a Delaware LLC with 3 principals and an office in Boston. She found out that one of those principals, a man named Dean Wycombe, had been a principal in 2 previous waterfront development companies, both of which had been sued by municipalities in Maine over, in one case, wetlands violations, and in the other, a rather creative reading of a historic preservation covenant. She found out that Crescent Bay's local point of contact in Harbor Point was a man named Eric Devlin, who happened to be the brother-in-law of the chair of the zoning board. She did not find this last thing on the internet. She found it, on the 4th day, by calling a woman named Ruth, who worked at the library on Main Street, and asking Ruth about Eric Devlin's family. "Oh, honey," said Ruth, "everyone knows Eric." "And Mike Halberd?" "Mike's his sister's husband." "Why?" "No reason?" "Sienna Vale." "Yeah, Ruth. That's a reason." "Thank you, Ruth." "You're welcome, honey. You stirring up trouble?" "I'm considering it." "Good." The trouble was that Landon Hayes was not, by nature, a man who stirred. He was a man who fixed. He fixed boats, and he fixed the front step when it cracked, and he fixed his son's lunchbox strap 3 times before replacing it. And he did not have, in his bones, the instinct for a fight where you had to make the other side look bad in public. Sienna did. She brought what she had to the kitchen table on a Friday night. Noah was asleep upstairs. She had 3 manila folders and a legal pad and a bottle of the cheap red wine Landon liked, and she sat across from him and she laid it all out. "I can kill this," she said. "Sienna, listen to me. Landon, I can kill this. The rezoning petition is being run by a guy whose brother-in-law chairs the board that's going to vote on it, and the development company behind it has 2 pending lawsuits over the exact same pattern of behavior in 2 other towns. This is a story. This is a real, provable, public interest story, and I can place it. Place it. Write it. Run it somewhere. The Globe will take it. I still know people at the Globe, or I run it at the Providence Journal. I have a guy at the Journal. We drop a piece that names names, we tie it to the main cases, we make it clear to Crescent Bay that Harbor Point is not going to be the quiet little acquisition they planned. And we make it clear to the zoning board that if they vote yes on that petition, they are voting yes in the middle of a story that is going to have their names in it. Sienna. The petition doesn't pass. You keep the yard. They move on to a town that doesn't have a Globe reporter sniffing around. He stared at her. You want to write a newspaper article? I want to write several, with my name on them. About the zoning board. About the developer. The zoning board is implicated. Landon, I am telling you, this is the thing I know how to do. This is the thing I was good at before I was good at running an office. This is what I was doing before I got promoted out of it. You'd put your name on it. Yes. And everyone in town would know it was you. Yes. And Marcus can eat his own hand. He laughed. It startled her. He laughed out loud at the kitchen table at 10 o'clock on a Friday night in the way of a man who had been carrying a very heavy thing and had just unexpectedly been allowed to put it down. You're serious, he said. I'm very serious. Sienna. Yeah. What if they sue you? Let them try. What if it doesn't work? Then we go to Plan B, which is me filing a formal complaint with the State Ethics Commission about the chair of the zoning board, which will take longer but will work eventually. You have a Plan B. I have a Plan C and a Plan D, actually, but I thought I'd spare you. He put his head down on his arms on the table and laughed, for a little while, in a way that wasn't entirely a laugh. Then he sat back up and he looked at her, and his face was open and his eyes were wet, and he said, Do it. Yeah? Do it. Whatever you need from me, do it. Okay. Sienna. Yeah. I love you. It was the first time he had said it. He said it plainly, the way he said everything. He did not make a big thing out of it. He said it like a man noting a fact he had been aware of for 9 months and had finally gotten around to mentioning. Her throat closed. Landon. Yeah. I love you too. Okay. Okay? I mean good. I'm saying good. She laughed. She laughed until she was almost crying. He reached across the table and took her hand, her whole hand, not the back of it, the whole hand, and held it, and they sat there like that, 2 people with a manila folder and a bottle of cheap red wine between them, for a long, quiet minute. Then Sienna Vale got to work. She spent the next 3 weeks on the phone. She filed records requests at the town clerk's office. She drove to Portland to meet a woman who had been the lead plaintiff against Dean Wycombe's last company. She interviewed 2 former employees of Crescent Bay, one of whom cried on the phone for 20 minutes before telling her what she needed to know. She called the editor at the Providence Journal she had once known, a tired, skeptical man named Frank, and she pitched him the piece in a 6-minute phone call that ended with Frank saying, Jesus, Vale, where have you been? And Sienna saying, I'll tell you over a drink. Get me 1,800 words. She wrote the piece in a weekend. She rewrote it on Monday. It ran on a Thursday in early April under her byline on the front page of the Journal's Sunday edition after Frank decided on Wednesday night that it was front page material. It was picked up by the Globe on Monday. It was picked up by one of the cable stations on Tuesday. Dean Wycombe's name was in all of them. Eric Devlin's name was in all of them. Mike Halberd's name was in all of them. And the fact that the Harbor Point Zoning Board was scheduled to vote on a rezoning petition the following Tuesday was in all of them too, along with a paragraph about how that vote was now the subject of statewide attention. The petition was withdrawn on Friday. It was withdrawn by Eric Devlin, in person, at the Zoning Board office, at 11 in the morning with no cameras present. Crescent Bay Partners issued a statement that evening saying the company had reevaluated its investment priorities and would not be pursuing the Harbor Point opportunity at this time. Dean Wycombe did not issue a statement. Landon found out when Ruth from the library called the Yellow House at 11:40 on Friday and said, "Tell Sienna she won," and hung up. Sienna was at the Yellow House when the phone rang. She was standing at the kitchen sink washing a pan, and the phone rang, and she answered it, and Ruth said her 4 words, and Sienna put the pan down in the sink very slowly and walked out onto the porch and sat down on the top step and put her face in her hands. She cried for about 5 minutes. Then she walked down to the boatyard. Landon was in the office. He stood up when she walked in. He didn't say anything. She didn't say anything. She walked across the office and she put her arms around him properly for the first time. The first real hug. The first hug that had not been a hello hug or a side hug at Noah's birthday party. And Landon Hayes put his arms around her and his face in her hair, and he held on. He held on for a long time. "Thank you," he said, muffled. "You're welcome." "Sienna." "Yeah, I'm going to marry you." She laughed into his shoulder. It came out wet. "You haven't asked. I'm warning you." "Okay. I'm warning you like a year out." "Landon. Is that all right?" "Yeah, that's all right." They stood there in the office in the afternoon light, and the radio was on low, and Pete was outside sanding a hull with the patience of a man who had learned months ago to stop coming into the office without knocking. After a while, Landon pulled back enough to look at her, and he pushed a piece of her hair behind her ear with a tenderness that was so unguarded it almost hurt to look at. "I gotta go get Noah in an hour," he said. "Okay." "Come to the house for dinner." "Okay." "Stay." "Okay." I meant more than dinner." "I know what you meant." "Okay." "Okay." She stayed. She did not that night move in. She went back to the Yellow House at 10:30 and slept in her own bed because she had made a rule with herself a long time ago that she was going to be the one to move slowly on this, not him. But she stayed for dinner. She stayed for the squid documentary Noah wanted to show her for the 3rd time. She stayed for bath time. She sat on the bathroom floor outside the door while Landon did the hair rinsing, and Noah yelled through the door, "Sienna, tell Dad I'm big enough to do my own hair," and Sienna yelled back, "You are absolutely not, buddy," and Landon laughed audibly from the other side of the door. She stayed for the tucking in. She watched from the hallway. Landon bent over the bed and pulled the quilt up to Noah's chin the way he had been doing since the boy was 3, and Noah said, in a voice that was already mostly asleep, "Can Sienna do the good night too?" And Landon stepped back and let her come forward. She leaned over the bed. She smelled the clean soap smell of his wet hair. Bartholomew the driftwood was back on the pillow where he belonged, facing outward. "Good night, buddy." "Night, Sienna." "Love you." She had not said it to him before. She had been waiting. She had been waiting to earn it, and she had not been sure until that precise moment that she had earned it. And then she said it, and she knew she had, because Noah said it back with the casual ease of a boy who had never, not for 1 second since Christmas, actually doubted it. "Love you too." She kissed his forehead. She turned out the lamp. In May, on a Saturday, they went to the beach. It was not the first time she had been on that beach since coming back. She had been on it a dozen times over the winter, in her coat, walking past in the cold. But it was the first time they had gone, the 3 of them, for no reason, with a bucket. The sand was cold. The wind was sharp. The tide was going out. Noah ran ahead. He had gotten taller over the winter, tall enough that his jeans from August didn't fit anymore. He ran with the bucket and the plastic shovel, and he stopped, exactly where he had always stopped, at the tide line where he had built and lost the castle 100 times in 6-year-old memory, and he dropped to his knees and got to work. Landon and Sienna walked behind him. They didn't hold hands. They didn't need to. Landon had his coffee. Sienna had hers. "Watch the tide line, bud." "I know, Dad." Sienna smiled into her cup. They reached him. He was already up to his elbows in wet sand. He had a plan, he informed them. And it was a new plan, and this time the plan involved a moat and a seawall, and he announced this part solemnly, as a new discovery, packing the bottom harder than the top. "Good," said Landon. "Dad taught me." "I was there," said Sienna. "I know," said Noah, without looking up. "You were the one who asked what the rule was." She went very still. Landon glanced at her. He had heard it too. Noah was already moving on. He was marking out the castle perimeter with the handle of the shovel. He was explaining in great detail where the tower was going to go and where the trap was going to go and where Dad— "Don't step here, okay, Dad? Okay? She knelt down in the sand beside him. Her knees were going to be wet for the whole walk home, and her jeans were going to be ruined, and she didn't care. And this time she didn't care in a different way than she had cared in August, because in August she had been trying to prove something to herself, and in May she was just a woman on a beach helping a boy dig a moat. Landon knelt down next to her. The three of them worked. They worked for a long time. They worked with the sun moving over them and the gulls arguing somewhere down the beach, and the wind doing what the wind did. Sienna packed the west wall harder than the top. Noah dug a moat that was objectively too deep. Landon built the tower because Landon was, by a wide margin, the best at the tower. They did not talk much. They did not need to. A man fixing a tower, a woman patching a wall, and a boy kneeling between them with his hand in the wet sand under a sky that had not made up its mind but would, eventually, come around to clear. Here's the thing the story wants to say, and the narrator is going to say it once, because it is the whole point, and because leaving it unsaid would be a kind of cowardice. People spend their 20s chasing the wrong castle. They build it far enough from the water that it looks impressive, and they forget that the water always comes. They build it high and pretty, and they make sure the tower is the part you see from the road. Sienna Vale built that castle for 10 years in Chicago. Landon Hayes, by contrast, had built his castle right at the tide line with another woman, and the water had taken it in one clean wave, and he had been rebuilding ever since, alone, with his son, on a beach where he already knew what the rule was. The rule is not that the castle doesn't fall. The rule is that you pack the bottom harder than the top, and you keep your eye on the tide. And when the water comes, you do not let go of the hands next to yours. You dig in. You build again. You build smaller and truer and closer to the people who were kneeling next to you when the first one came down. You stop trying to build something that will last forever and you start building something worth coming back to tomorrow. Sienna learned this on a Tuesday morning in Buffalo, and it took her 7 more months to learn it for real. And the real learning happened in laundry and in QuickBooks and in waiting for a 7-year-old to decide when he was ready to love her again. You don't earn a life. You show up for one. You show up for one, and you show up again the next day. And you show up on the days when nobody's watching and nobody's clapping and nobody is going to put your name in a magazine for it. That is the whole of it. That is the secret the glossy magazine Sienna Vale used to run never printed, because it doesn't sell. On the beach, the castle held. It held through the afternoon. It held while Noah added a second tower and a flag made of a piece of driftwood and a yellow leaf. It held while the three of them stood up and brushed the sand off their jeans and stepped back to look at it, and Noah, arms crossed, surveyed it with the serious satisfaction of a foreman. "Good one," he said. "Best one," said Landon. "Will it fall?" said Sienna. "Eventually," said Noah. "Yeah," said Landon. "That's okay," said Noah. He said it casually. He said it like a kid saying something he had known for a long time and had not, until that moment, had any reason to say out loud. Landon reached for Sienna's hand. She reached for his. Noah, standing in front of them, pointed down the beach at a piece of driftwood he had spotted and announced that it was a perfect Bartholomew cousin, and he needed to go get it immediately. And he took off running without waiting for an answer, the way 7-year-olds did, the way 8-year-olds did too, the way she understood with a sudden sweet certainty 9 and 10 and 11-year-olds were going to. She watched him run. Landon's fingers tightened around hers. Out past the point, the light on the water went the color of a struck bell. A gull banked low over the tide line. The castle stood, for now, in the wet sand, with its slightly crooked tower and its too-deep moat and its two walls packed harder than the top. Far down the beach, a small boy in a blue jacket ran ahead of his parents toward a piece of driftwood with the whole afternoon stretched open ahead of him and behind him at the tide line. A man and a woman stood holding hands on a beach where they had first met 9 months before. This time not building a castle they were afraid would fall, but beginning a life they were going to keep rebuilding together for as long as it took. The wave would come, eventually. They would be there when it did.